I've always been a light sleeper, but tonight feels different. The ceiling fan above me turns in slow, hypnotic circles, casting shifting shadows across the room in rhythm with the streetlight filtering through my bedroom blinds. The mechanical hum should be soothing. It always has been before, but now it only amplifies the awareness of everything else. The way the mattress dips slightly to my left. The sound of breathing that isn't my own. The warmth radiating from another body just inches away from mine. Theo lies beside me, still as stone except for the gentle rise and fall of his chest. His shoulder blade presses against the mattress near enough that when I breathe too deeply, we almost touch. Almost. There's maybe 3 inches of space between us, but it feels both infinite and non-existent at the same time. I can smell his soap, something clean and woodsy that I've known for years, but never noticed quite like this. Never while lying in the dark with my pulse refusing to settle. I keep my eyes fixed on the ceiling, tracing the familiar water stain near the corner that I've been meaning to fix for months. My apartment is small, the bedroom even smaller, and having another person in here changes everything about the space I thought I knew. The room feels charged now, like the air before a thunderstorm when you can taste the electricity but don't know when the lightning will strike. Hours ago, this felt simpler. Theo had shown up at my door with a duffel bag and that easy grin he's worn since we were 17, the one that makes people trust him immediately. Emergency repairs at his place, he'd said. Water damage from a burst pipe upstairs. Could he crash here for a couple nights while the landlord sorted it out? Of course, I told him. Of course he could stay. We'd fallen into our usual rhythm. Takeout containers spread across my coffee table, cheap wine in mismatched glasses, stories we'd told before, but somehow needed to tell again. Theo has this way of making even my quiet apartment feel alive, filling corners with his voice and his presence until the silence I usually crave becomes something I can't imagine wanting back. When midnight came and went, I'd offered to set up the couch. I have extra pillows, spare blankets tucked away in the hall closet. It would have been easy, practical, but Theo had waved me off with that casual confidence of his. The kind that makes him assume everyone else is as comfortable in their skin as he appears to be. We can share your bed, he'd said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Unless you're scared I'll cuddle you or something. His tone had been light, teasing, the way it always is when he's trying to make someone laugh. That familiar rhythm of setup and punchline that I've heard him use 1,000 times with 1,000 different people. But something in my chest had tightened at the words, a response I couldn't name and couldn't stop. I'd looked at him then, really looked at him, and without thinking said, I don't mind. The words had come out quieter than I'd intended, more honest than I'd meant them to be. They hung in the air between us for a moment that stretched longer than it should have, and I'd waited for his laugh, for the easy deflection that would turn this back into just another joke between friends. But Theo hadn't laughed. Instead, his expression had shifted into something I'd never seen before, serious, almost searching. He'd studied my face like he was reading words written there, and whatever he found made him go very still. Then he'd just nodded, slow and deliberate, and said, All right then. The absence of laughter had been louder than any sound. Now, lying here in the dark, I replay that moment over and over, trying to decode the silence that followed. Theo has never been one to let a joke die without wringing every last bit of humor from it, but he'd let this one dissolve completely, replaced by something that felt heavier and more fragile than anything we'd ever shared. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see his profile in the dim light. His face is relaxed in sleep, the sharp line of his jaw softened, dark hair falling across his forehead in a way that makes him look younger than his 28 years. He's beautiful in that effortless way some people are, the kind of beautiful that makes you forget to breathe when you're not careful. I've known Theo for over a decade. I've seen him hungover and heartbroken, laughing until he cries, angry enough to punch walls. I've watched him fall in love with 3 different women and get his heart shattered by 2 of them. I know that he takes his coffee black, that he's afraid of spiders but won't admit it, that he calls his mother every Sunday, even though their conversations always end in an argument about something. But I've never known him like this. Never shared a bed with him, never listened to the sound of his breathing in the quiet hours when the rest of the world is asleep. Never been close enough to feel the heat coming off his skin or notice the way he curls his fingers slightly when he dreams. It should feel comfortable, We've been friends long enough that physical space between us has never been awkward. We've shared couches during movie nights, squeezed into crowded booths at bars, hugged goodbye at airports without thinking twice about it. But this feels different, weighted with implications I don't dare examine too closely. Because the truth is, I do mind. Not in the way he might have expected, not because I'm uncomfortable or annoyed by his presence. I mind because lying next to him like this makes me want things I've spent years not wanting, makes me imagine possibilities I've trained myself to ignore. I mind because when he made that joke about cuddling, something inside me whispered, "Yes, please." The ceiling fan continues its lazy rotation, and I focus on counting the turns, trying to calm the restless energy that's been building in my chest all evening. 1, 2, 3. But the numbers don't help, can't distract me from the hyper-awareness of every sound, every shift in the mattress, every breath that brings his shoulder almost close enough to brush against mine. This is my best friend, the person who knows me better than anyone else in the world, who's seen me at my worst and stayed anyway. The person who texts me random thoughts at 2 in the morning and shows up at my door when he needs somewhere to belong. The person who matters more to me than I've ever been brave enough to admit, even to myself. And he's lying in my bed, 3 inches away from me in the dark, after not laughing at a joke that should have been meaningless but somehow wasn't. I close my eyes and try to will myself to sleep, but my mind keeps circling back to that moment in my living room, to the way his expression had changed when I'd said those 3 quiet words. "I don't mind." Such a simple response, but it had shifted something between us, opened a door I'd never intended to unlock. The question that keeps me awake isn't what I meant by saying it. I know exactly what I meant, even if I can't bring myself to acknowledge it fully. The question is what Theo heard when I said it, and why he'd chosen silence instead of laughter. In the morning, we'll have coffee and pretend this is normal, pretend that sharing a bed is just what friends do when one of them needs a place to crash. We'll joke about how small my apartment is, how the couch would have been too uncomfortable anyway. We'll slip back into our familiar patterns and rhythms, and maybe this strange, charged feeling will fade back into the background where it belongs. But right now, in the quiet darkness of my bedroom, with Theo's breathing steady beside me and the space between us crackling with unspoken possibilities, I can't pretend this is just about friendship. I can't pretend that the way my heart hammers against my ribs is anything other than what it is. I don't mind, I told him. And God help me, I'd meant it in ways that terrify me. The morning light filters through my blinds in thin golden strips, casting geometric patterns across the hardwood floor of my bedroom. I wake to the sound of Theo moving quietly around my kitchen, the soft clink of ceramic and the whisper of cabinet doors opening and closing. He's making coffee, I realize, and the familiar ritual of it, the way he knows where I keep everything, how he's done this a dozen times before when he stayed over after late nights, should feel normal. But nothing about this morning feels normal. I teach 4th grade at Roosevelt Elementary, a job that requires me to be awake and alert by 7:30 every weekday. My life runs on routines, small predictable rhythms that keep me grounded. Coffee first, always black. Toast with jam if I'm hungry, nothing if I'm running late. Check my lesson plans one more time before I leave the apartment. Drive the same route to work, park in the same spot, arrive 15 minutes early to arrange my classroom exactly the way I need it to be. It's a quiet life, and I've built it that way deliberately. My apartment sits on the 3rd floor of a converted brownstone near the edge of the city, where the neighborhoods start to blur from urban to suburban and rent is just manageable on a teacher's salary. The rooms are small but mine, filled with books I actually read, music I actually listened to, plants I somehow manage not to kill. The kitchen table where I grade papers every evening. The couch where I eat dinner alone more often than not, watching documentaries or old movies with the volume low. Most people would call it lonely, but I've never minded being alone. There's a peace in it, a freedom from having to perform or pretend or be anything other than exactly who I am. My circle is deliberately small, a few colleagues I genuinely like, neighbors I exchange pleasantries with, the woman at the coffee shop who knows my order by heart. And at the center of it all, always, there's been Theo. We met during our senior year of high school when his family moved to town mid-semester. I was 17 and painfully shy, the kind of kid who ate lunch in the library and kept his head down in the hallways. Theo was everything I wasn't. Confident without being arrogant, funny without being cruel, magnetic in a way that drew people to him like gravity. He could have befriended anyone, could have slipped seamlessly into any group, but for reasons I still don't entirely understand, he chose me. Maybe it was because I was safe, undemanding. I didn't need him to be constantly entertaining or always on. I was content to listen to his stories, to be the steady presence while he navigated the chaos of teenage social politics. Or maybe he saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself, some quality worth preserving, worth protecting. Whatever it was, it worked. We became inseparable that final semester, and somehow the friendship survived graduation, college, moves to different cities, the inevitable growing apart that happens when you're trying to figure out who you're supposed to become. Through it all, Theo remained constant. A voice on the phone when I needed to hear it, a presence that could make any space feel less empty just by existing in it. He's had 3 serious relationships that I know of, and probably twice as many casual ones. Sarah, who lasted 2 years and broke his heart when she moved to Portland for graduate school. Michelle, who he thought he might marry until she decided she wanted someone more spontaneous, more willing to upend his life for the sake of adventure. And most recently, Kate, who ended things 6 months ago because she said he seemed distracted, like part of him was always somewhere else. I've listened to him process each heartbreak, offered advice I wasn't qualified to give, helped him analyze text messages and dissect conversations until we'd wrung every possible meaning from every word. I've been the friend who shows up with beer and terrible movies when he needs distraction, who lets him crash on my couch when he can't stand being alone in his own apartment. And through all of it, I've maintained the careful distance necessary to keep my own feelings buried so deep I could almost pretend they didn't exist. Because the truth is, I've been in love with Theo Mercer since I was 18 years old and too naive to recognize what the ache in my chest meant. I've watched him fall in love with other people, celebrated his happiness even when it felt like swallowing glass, and convinced myself that being his friend was enough. That loving him from this safe distance was better than risking everything by wanting more. But lately, something has been shifting between us. It started small, text messages that came later at night and lingered longer, conversations that drifted into territory we'd never explored before. The way he started hugging me goodbye, really hugging me, like he doesn't want to let go. Moments of eye contact that stretched just a beat too long, loaded with something I'm afraid to name. Last month, we'd gone to dinner at that Italian place downtown we've been going to for years. Nothing special, nothing different from 100 other dinners we'd shared. But when the check came and he reached for his wallet, his hand had brushed against mine on the table, and instead of pulling away immediately, he'd let his fingers rest there for a moment. Just a moment, but long enough for me to wonder if I was imagining the way his thumb had traced across my knuckles before he pulled back. 2 weeks ago, he'd called me at midnight. Not because he needed anything specific, but because he couldn't sleep and wanted to hear my voice. We'd talked until 3 in the morning about nothing important. Childhood memories, dreams we'd given up on, fears we rarely admitted even to ourselves. When we finally hung up, I'd lain awake until dawn, replaying every word and wondering what it meant that he'd chosen to share that quiet, vulnerable space with me. I hear his footsteps approaching the bedroom now, and I quickly close my eyes, feigning sleep. He moves carefully, trying not to wake me, and I feel the mattress dip as he sits on the edge of the bed to pull on his socks. The simple domesticity of it, Theo getting dressed in my bedroom, the morning light painting everything soft and golden, makes my chest tight with longing. This is dangerous territory, I know. This careful attention to moments that might mean nothing, this cataloging of touches and glances like evidence in a case I'm building toward a conclusion I'm terrified to reach. But lying here, listening to him breathe in the space we shared all night, I can't seem to stop myself from wanting to know what would happen if I was brave enough to find out. The rain arrives on Friday evening like an unwelcome guest, sudden and insistent against my windows. I'm grading math tests at my kitchen table, red pen moving mechanically across pages of long division problems, when I hear footsteps on the stairs outside my apartment. Heavy, familiar footsteps that take the steps 2 at a time the way only one person I know does. Before I can get up to check, there's a knock at my door, not the polite, measured knock of a neighbor or delivery person, but the rapid, slightly impatient rhythm that belongs to someone who knows they're welcome. I open the door to find Theo standing in my hallway, hair damp from the rain, a canvas duffel bag slung over his shoulder, and that crooked smile I've known for over a decade. "Sorry to just show up like this," he says, pushing wet hair back from his forehead. "The pipe in the apartment above mine burst this afternoon. Water everywhere. Landlord says it'll be at least the weekend before I can go back." "Of course," I tell him, stepping aside to let him in. "Of course he can stay." The words come automatically, the same response I've given him countless times over the years. But tonight there's something different in the way my pulse quickens as he brushes past me into the apartment. He sets his bag down by the couch and looks around the space like he's seeing it for the first time, though he's been here more times than I can count. "Your place always feels so calm," he says. "Like nothing bad could happen here." I don't know how to respond to that, so I offer coffee instead. We settle into our usual rhythm, him sprawling across my couch while I move around the kitchen, both of us talking about our days in the easy, comfortable way we've perfected over the years. But there's an undercurrent tonight, something electric in the air that has nothing to do with the storm outside. We order Thai food from the place down the street, the same dishes we always get, and eat straight from the containers while rain pounds against the windows. Theo tells me about work, about the client who's been making his life miserable all week, about his mother's latest attempt to set him up with the daughter of someone from her book club. I tell him about my students, about the parent conference that went surprisingly well, about the new coffee shop I discovered on my way home from work. Normal conversation, the kind we've had 1,000 times before. But every word feels weighted tonight, every shared glance charged with something I can't name. When he laughs at something I say, really laughs, throwing his head back the way he does when he's genuinely delighted, I feel it in my chest like a physical thing. By the time we finish eating, we've moved through a bottle of the cheap red wine I keep for occasions like this. Not drunk, not even close, but relaxed in a way that makes everything feel softer around the edges. Theo has migrated from the couch to the floor, leaning back against the coffee table, legs stretched out in front of him. The lamplight catches the angles of his face, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes crinkle slightly at the corners when he smiles. It's past midnight when the conversation finally starts to wind down, and I realize we've been talking for hours without either of us checking our phones or glancing at the clock. Just talking, the way we used to when we were younger and time felt infinite. About books we've been reading, movies we want to see, places we'd like to travel if we ever save enough money. About our families, our fears, the strange way adulthood never quite feels like what we thought it would be. Eventually, inevitably, the question of sleeping arrangements comes up. I start to get up, already mentally cataloging where I keep the spare pillows and blankets, when Theo waves me off with a lazy gesture. "Don't worry about setting up the couch," he says. His voice is casual, easy, but there's something underneath it that makes me pause. "We can share your bed. Unless you're scared I'll cuddle you or something." The words hang in the air between us, and I feel that familiar tightening in my chest, the one that comes whenever he gets too close to territory I've spent years avoiding. He's grinning at me, waiting for me to laugh, to deflect with some joke of my own that will turn this back into the safe, familiar banter we both know how to navigate. But something stops me. Maybe it's the wine, or the intimacy of the evening, or the way the storm outside has created this cocoon of warmth and closeness that feels separate from the rest of the world. Maybe it's just that I'm tired of pretending, tired of careful distances and unspoken boundaries. I look at him, really look at him, taking in the expectant expression on his face, the way he's leaning forward slightly like he's waiting for something. And instead of laughing, instead of making the joke that would keep us safely in the territory we've always occupied, I hear myself say, quiet and honest, "I don't mind." The change in his expression is immediate and unmistakable. The easy grin fades, replaced by something I've never seen before, serious, searching, almost vulnerable. He studies my face like he's reading words written there in a language he's just beginning to understand. The silence stretches between us, heavy with implications neither of us is ready to voice. Then he nods, slow and deliberate, and says, "All right then." No laughter, no deflection, just those two words, spoken in a voice I barely recognize as his, softer than usual, careful in a way that makes my heart hammer against my ribs. The absence of his laugh echoes in the quiet apartment long after we've turned off the lights and settled into my bed, lying carefully on opposite sides of the mattress like we're afraid of what might happen if we get too close. But even with the space between us, even with both of us pretending to sleep, I can feel everything changing in the darkness around us. Something has shifted tonight, some invisible line has been crossed, and there's no going back to the way things were before. The only question now is what comes next. That first night changes something fundamental between us, though neither of us acknowledges it directly. When I wake Saturday morning, Theo is already up, standing at my kitchen counter with his back to me, shoulders relaxed in a way that suggests he slept better than I did. The space where he lay still holds the impression of his body, a subtle dip in the mattress that I find myself staring at longer than I should. We don't sleep on opposite edges of the bed the way I expected we would. Instead, throughout the night, we seem to drift toward each other in unconscious increments. His shoulder blade finds the space between my shoulder blades. My knee brushes against his calf. At one point, deep in sleep, I wake to find our feet nearly touching under the blanket, and instead of pulling away, I let myself exist in that small point of contact until morning. It should feel strange, sharing such intimate space with someone I've known for so long as just a friend. But there's something profoundly comfortable about it too. The steady rhythm of his breathing beside me, the warmth radiating from his skin, the way he doesn't snore but makes these small, almost inaudible sounds when he dreams. I lie awake longer than I should, cataloging these details I've never had access to before, storing them away like secrets. Saturday unfolds with the lazy pace of a weekend that belongs to no one but us. We make breakfast together, moving around my small kitchen in a careful dance of reaching around each other for coffee mugs and plates. When Theo opens the wrong cabinet looking for the cereal, I reach past him to show him the right one, and our bodies brush for just a moment, his back against my chest, solid and warm through his t-shirt. He doesn't step away immediately, and neither do I. Later, we walk to the farmer's market downtown despite the lingering dampness from last night's rain. The air smells clean and electric, like the earth is still recovering from the storm. Theo buys peaches from a vendor who flirts with him shamelessly, and he responds with that easy charm of his. But when he turns back to me, his attention feels complete and focused in a way that makes something flutter in my chest. We eat the peaches sitting on a bench in the small park across from the market, juice running down our wrists, talking about nothing important. But the conversation feels different now, less careful somehow. When I mention that I've been thinking about taking a photography class, Theo doesn't just nod politely the way he might have before. Instead, he leans forward, genuinely interested, asking what kind of photography, why now, what I hope to capture that I'm not capturing already. That evening, we order pizza and watch a documentary about marine biology that neither of us particularly wanted to see, but both of us end up absorbed in. Theo stretches out on my couch, and without really thinking about it, I settle beside him instead of in the armchair where I usually sit. Close enough that when he shifts position, his leg presses against mine through our jeans. He doesn't move away. Neither do I. Sunday brings more of the same subtle intimacy. These small moments that feel both monumental and completely natural. When Theo reaches for the milk at the same time I do, his hand covers mine for just a second longer than necessary. When I squeeze past him in the narrow hallway between my bedroom and bathroom, his hand briefly rests on my lower back, steadying, guiding, casual as breathing but charged with an awareness that wasn't there before. The conversations stretch deeper as the weekend progresses. Lying in bed Sunday night, we talk about relationships in a way we never have before. Not just the surface details we've always shared, but the deeper currents underneath. Theo tells me about feeling like he's been performing his whole life, like every relationship has been an attempt to be the person he thought he was supposed to be rather than whoever he actually is. I've never felt like myself with anyone, he says into the darkness. Not completely. Not the way I do with you. His words hang in the air between us, and I feel my heartbeat in my throat. There's something in his voice I've never heard before, vulnerability, maybe, or recognition. Like he's just realized something he's been avoiding for a long time. I tell him about the loneliness I've carried, about building a life so carefully controlled that there's no room for chaos or surprise or the kind of mess that comes with letting someone else in completely. About wanting connection but being terrified of what it might cost. But it doesn't feel lonely with you here, I admit, and the confession feels like stepping off a cliff. The silence that follows isn't uncomfortable. It's full, weighted with understanding that neither of us is quite ready to put into words. In the darkness, I feel Theo shift beside me, turning onto his side to face me, though I can barely see his outline in the dim light filtering through my blinds. Good, he says simply, because I don't want to leave. It's not a declaration, not exactly, but it's something, this quiet acknowledgement that what's happening between us isn't just in my imagination, that the careful distances we've maintained for years are giving way to something neither of us expected, but both of us recognize. That night, for the first time, when our hands brush under the blanket, neither of us pulls away. We don't hold hands, don't intertwine our fingers, but we let our knuckles rest against each other in the space between our bodies. Such a small thing, barely touching at all, but it feels like the most honest gesture either of us has ever made. When I finally fall asleep, it's with the awareness that everything is changing, has already changed, and that there's no going back to the safe distance we've maintained for so long. Tomorrow, Theo will go back to his own apartment, back to his own life. But something fundamental has shifted between us in these 3 days. The question now isn't whether we've crossed a line, but what we're going to do about it. Monday morning arrives with the kind of brightness that makes everything feel possible and terrifying at the same time. Theo's apartment is ready. His landlord texted him Sunday evening, but when I mention it over coffee, he just nods and says maybe he'll head back this afternoon. Maybe. The word hangs between us like a question neither of us is brave enough to ask directly. We spend the morning in a strange state of suspension, both of us aware that something needs to be said, but neither knowing how to begin. Theo helps me prep lesson plans for the week, sitting at my kitchen table with a stack of worksheets, carefully cutting along dotted lines while I organize supplies for tomorrow's science experiment. It's domestic in a way that feels both completely natural and impossibly intimate. When his phone buzzes with a text from his landlord asking when he plans to come by for his keys, Theo stares at the screen for a long moment before setting it aside, without responding. I have to work late tonight anyway, he says, as if that explains the hesitation. Might as well stay one more night if that's okay with you. Of course it's okay. It's more than okay, but I can't say that without revealing too much about how much I want him to stay, about how the thought of going back to sleeping alone in my bed feels impossible now that I know what it's like to share the space with him. The day passes with the kind of nervous energy that comes before important conversations, the kind you know are coming but can't quite force yourself to initiate. We order Chinese food for dinner and eat it while watching a movie neither of us pays attention to. Every casual touch feels loaded now. When Theo reaches across me for the remote, when I lean against his shoulder to get a better view of the screen, when our feet tangle together on the coffee table. By the time we turn off the lights and settle into bed, the tension between us is almost unbearable. We lie facing opposite directions like we did that first night, but everything feels different now. The careful distance we maintained then has been replaced by an awareness so acute it's almost painful. I can hear everything. The sound of Theo's breathing, the rustle of sheets when he shifts position, the way the mattress creaks slightly under our combined weight. Outside, the city hums with its usual nighttime symphony of distant traffic and air conditioners. But inside my bedroom, the silence feels pregnant with everything we haven't said. It's Theo who breaks it first, his voice quiet in the darkness. You really didn't mind, huh? Me sleeping here? The question catches me off guard, not because I don't know the answer, but because of the way he asks it. There's something vulnerable in his tone, something searching that makes my chest tight with possibility and fear. I turn over to face him, though I can barely make out his profile in the dim light filtering through my blinds. No, I tell him, and my voice comes out softer than I intended. I liked it, actually. The admission hangs between us, more honest than anything either of us has said all weekend. I wait for him to deflect, to make a joke that will diffuse the tension and return us to safer ground. But instead, I hear him shifting in the darkness, turning to face me. I didn't laugh, he says, so quietly I almost miss it, because I didn't want you to think I was kidding when I said it. My breath catches in my throat. The air between us feels fragile suddenly, like glass that might shatter if either of us moves too quickly or speaks too loudly. I can feel the heat radiating from his body across the small space that separates us, can smell that familiar scent of his soap, and something underneath it that's purely him. What he's telling me, what he's admitting, rewrites every interaction we've had over the past 3 days. Every lingering touch, every meaningful glance, every moment of comfortable intimacy suddenly takes on new weight, new significance. He wasn't just being friendly. He wasn't just grateful for a place to crash. He was testing boundaries, same as I was. Seeing what might be possible between us. Theo, I start to say, but my voice cracks on his name. I clear my throat and try again. Theo, what are you saying? Instead of answering with words, he reaches out in the darkness, his hand finding mine under the blanket. Not grabbing, not pulling, just barely brushing his fingers against my knuckles in the lightest possible touch. But even that small contact sends electricity shooting up my arm, makes my heart hammer so loudly I'm sure he can hear it. I'm saying, he whispers, that maybe I've been thinking about this wrong. About us. About what this is. His thumb traces across the back of my hand. Such a simple gesture, but one that feels monumental in the context of everything we've never said to each other. I close my eyes and try to steady my breathing, try to find words for the hope that's blooming in my chest despite every instinct telling me to be careful, to protect myself, to not want something this badly. I've been thinking about it too, I admit. For longer than just this weekend. How long? He asks, and there's something almost desperate in the question, like he needs to know exactly when this started, exactly how much time we've both spent dancing around something that might have been possible all along. The honest answer is years. The honest answer is that I've been in love with him since we were barely adults, that every relationship he's had with someone else has felt like watching him choose a life that didn't include me in the way I wanted to be included. But I can't say that, not yet. It's too much, too overwhelming, too likely to send him running back to the safety of his own apartment. A while, I say instead. Longer than I should have. His fingers curl around mine then, not quite holding hands, but something close to it. The gesture is tentative, careful, like he's afraid I might pull away. But I don't pull away. Instead, I let my fingers relax into his touch, let myself exist in this moment of possibility that feels like standing at the edge of everything I've ever wanted. Yeah, he says, and I can hear the smile in his voice even though I can't see his face. Me too. We lie there in the darkness, hands barely touching, and everything between us shifts into something new and terrifying and absolutely inevitable. Tomorrow will bring questions we'll have to answer, decisions we'll have to make about what this means for our friendship, for our futures, for the careful life I've built. But tonight, in the quiet intimacy of my bedroom, with Theo's fingers warm against mine and his breathing gradually slowing into sleep, I let myself believe that maybe, finally, the distance between us is closing. Tuesday morning feels different from every morning that came before it. I wake to find Theo already awake beside me, lying on his side facing me in the pale light filtering through my blinds. His eyes are open, thoughtful, like he's been watching me sleep, or maybe just thinking about everything that passed between us in the darkness last night. Good morning, he says, and his voice is soft, careful in a way that suggests he's as uncertain about how to navigate this new territory as I am. Good morning, I reply, suddenly aware of how close we are, how our hands are still touching under the blanket where we left them hours ago. Neither of us moves to pull away. We lie there for a few minutes in comfortable silence, and I find myself memorizing the details of his face in the morning light, the way his hair falls across his forehead, the slight stubble along his jawline, the way his eyes look softer without the careful guards he usually keeps in place. This is dangerous, I think. This cataloging of intimate details, this assumption that I'll have access to mornings like this in the future. But I can't seem to stop myself from wanting it. Eventually, we get up and move through the morning routine we've established over the past few days. Coffee first, then breakfast. Easy conversation that feels both familiar and charged with new possibility. Theo mentions that he really should go back to his apartment today, that he has clean clothes to pick up and mail to collect, but he says it without conviction, like he's testing to see how I'll respond. I want to tell him to stay. I want to say that the thought of him leaving feels like losing something essential, something I didn't know I needed until I had it. But the words stick in my throat, held back by years of careful boundaries and the fear that wanting too much, too fast, will ruin whatever chance we might have. Instead, I just nod and say that makes sense, and I watch something shift in his expression. Disappointment, maybe, or resignation. The day passes with the weight of unfinished conversations and decisions that need to be made. Theo packs his bag slowly, methodically, like he's trying to delay the inevitable. I grade papers at my kitchen table and pretend not to notice the way he keeps glancing at me, the way he finds excuses to linger in whatever room I'm in. By evening, we've settled into a strange kind of limbo. His bag sits packed by the door, but he makes no move to leave. We order dinner and eat it while sitting closer together on my couch than we probably need to, our knees touching, our shoulders brushing when we reach for our drinks. When the food is finished and the dishes are washed, and there are no more mundane tasks to distract us from what we both know needs to happen, we end up back in my bedroom. Not because we're ready for sleep. It's barely 9 o'clock, but because it's become our space for honest conversations, the place where the careful pretenses we maintain everywhere else can finally be set aside. We lie on top of the blankets this time, facing each other in the lamplight, and the air between us crackles with everything we haven't said. I can feel the weight of the moment pressing down on us, the sense that whatever happens next will determine the shape of everything that comes after. It's now or never, I realize. This moment of possibility won't last forever. Either I find the courage to tell him what I've been hiding all these years, or I let him walk out that door, and we both pretend this was just a weekend between friends, nothing more. The fear is overwhelming. Fear of rejection, of losing him completely, of ruining the best friendship I've ever had by wanting more than it was meant to hold. But the fear of not knowing, of spending the rest of my life wondering what might have been, is even worse. Theo, I say, and my voice sounds strange to my own ears, rougher than usual. There's something I need to tell you. He turns his head to look at me fully, and I see something in his eyes that looks like recognition, like he's been waiting for this moment as much as I have. I've liked you. I continue, the words coming out in a rush before I can lose my nerve. For a long time. Years, actually. I know that probably changes things between us, and I know you might not feel the same way, but I can't keep pretending anymore. I can't keep acting like this is just friendship when it's never felt like just friendship to me. The silence that follows feels eternal. I watch Theo's face for any sign of what he's thinking, any clue about whether I've just destroyed the most important relationship in my life or opened the door to something even better. When he finally speaks, his voice is so quiet I have to strain to hear it. Yeah, he says, and then he reaches out to touch my face, his palm warm against my cheek. I know. I think I've known for a while now. My heart stops, then starts again twice as fast. I know? What does that mean? And I feel the same. He continues, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone in a gesture so tender it makes my chest ache. I think I have for longer than I wanted to admit, even to myself. The words wash over me like a revelation, like sunlight breaking through clouds I didn't even realize had been blocking my view. He feels the same. After all these years of careful distance and unspoken longing, he feels the same. I don't know what to say, how to respond to having everything I've wanted for so long suddenly within reach. So instead of words, I let myself lean into his touch, let myself close the distance between us until our foreheads are almost touching. His hand slides from my cheek to the back of my neck, fingers tangling in my hair, and I feel him pull me closer until there's no space left between us at all. This is it, I think. This is the moment everything changes, when we stop being just friends and become something else entirely. Are you sure? I whisper, because I need to hear him say it one more time. Need to be certain this isn't just a moment of confusion or loneliness or something he'll regret in the morning. His answer comes without hesitation, his hand tightening in my hair, his eyes locked on mine with an intensity that takes my breath away. I'm sure, he says. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The morning after everything changes arrives with the kind of quiet that feels sacred, untouchable. I wake slowly, consciousness returning in gentle waves rather than the sharp jolt of an alarm. The first thing I notice is warmth. Not just the familiar warmth of sunlight through my blinds, but the heat of another body close to mine, closer than we've ever allowed ourselves to be before. Theo's arm is draped across my waist, his chest pressed against my back, his breathing steady and deep against the nape of my neck. We've gravitated toward each other in sleep, naturally and without conscious thought. the way two people do when the barriers between them have finally fallen away. I lie still for a long moment, afraid that moving might break whatever spell has settled over us, might remind us both of all the reasons we spent years dancing around this instead of simply reaching for it. But the fear that kept me awake so many nights before feels distant now, replaced by something calmer and more certain. When Theo stirs behind me, his arm tightening slightly around my waist before he fully wakes, I feel him go still as he registers our position. But he doesn't pull away. Instead, his lips brush against my shoulder, not quite a kiss, but close enough to one that my heart skips. "Good morning," he murmurs, his voice rough with sleep and something softer that I'm still learning to recognize. "Good morning," I reply, turning in his arms to face him. The movement brings us even closer, and I can see the exact moment he remembers everything that passed between us last night. The confessions, the careful touches, the way we finally let ourselves acknowledge what we'd been avoiding for so long. His smile starts slow, uncertain, then grows into something radiant and relieved. Like he'd been afraid this might all disappear with daylight, that I might retreat back into the careful distance we'd maintained for years. We don't talk about what this means for us, not immediately. Instead, we move through the morning with a new kind of awareness. Every interaction colored by the knowledge that we're no longer just best friends sharing space. When I reach around him to get coffee mugs from the cabinet, he doesn't step aside the way he used to. When he brushes past me at the sink, his hand settles naturally on my hip, casual and possessive in a way that makes my chest warm. I call in sick to work, something I never do, something that would have been unthinkable just a week ago when my life ran on rigid schedules and predictable routines. But nothing about this feels predictable anymore, and the thought of leaving Theo to go teach long division and spelling tests feels impossible when we're still figuring out how to exist in this new space we've created. He doesn't mention going back to his apartment. His bag sits unpacked by the door where he left it yesterday, forgotten in favor of this careful exploration of what it means to touch each other intentionally, to let casual contact linger longer than strictly necessary. We make breakfast together, and when Theo laughs at something I say, he reaches out to touch my arm without thinking about it, his hand settling on my wrist like it belongs there. When I pour his coffee, I stand closer than I need to, close enough that he has to look up at me, close enough that the space between us feels charged with possibility rather than tension. Later, we end up on my couch with books neither of us really reads, my legs stretched across his lap, his thumb tracing absent patterns on my ankle. The television plays something low and unimportant in the background, but we're not watching. Instead, we're learning each other in this new context, the weight of his hand on my leg, the way his smile looks when it's meant for me in a way it never was before, the comfortable silence that comes from not having to pretend anymore. That afternoon, when exhaustion finally catches up with us, the emotional weight of the past few days, the sleepless nights spent wanting and not knowing if we should, we migrate back to my bedroom. Not to talk this time, not to confess or reveal or risk anything, just to rest together in the space that's become ours. Theo lies down first, and when I settle beside him, he pulls me closer without asking, his arm around my shoulders, my head finding the hollow of his chest like it was designed to fit there. His heartbeat is steady under my ear, and I close my eyes and let myself exist in this moment of perfect contentment. This is what I was afraid of losing, I realize. Not just his friendship, but this, the absolute peace that comes from being exactly where you belong with exactly the person you belong with. The fear that kept me silent for so long was never really about rejection. It was about the possibility that wanting more might mean losing everything. But lying here with Theo's fingers combing through my hair, his lips pressing occasional kisses to the top of my head, I understand that we haven't lost anything. We've only found something we didn't know we were allowed to have. When evening comes, we order dinner from the same Thai place we always do, but Theo doesn't migrate to his usual spot on the opposite end of the couch. Instead, he sits close enough that our knees touch, close enough that when he reaches for his water, his shoulder brushes against mine. Later, as we get ready for bed, our bed, no longer his borrowed space in my room, but something that belongs to both of us. He catches my eye in the bathroom mirror while he brushes his teeth. "This okay?" he asks around his toothbrush, and I know he's not just asking about sleeping arrangements. He's asking about all of it. The casual touches, the assumption of closeness, the way we've slipped into this new version of ourselves like we were always meant to be here. More than okay, I tell him, and mean it completely. That night, when we climb into bed, there's no careful distance, no pretending we might accidentally touch in our sleep. Theo reaches for me immediately, and I let him pull me close, let myself settle against his chest like I've done it 1,000 times before. No jokes about cuddling. No nervous laughter. Just two people who finally stopped being afraid of what they wanted, lying in the dark together, breathing in sync, completely at peace with what they've found in each other. This is how love is supposed to feel, I think, as I drift toward sleep. Not desperate or anxious or uncertain, but calm and sure and inevitable as sunrise. Like coming home to a place you didn't know you'd been searching for your entire life.